Coming up on this podcast, a new report debunking myths around morning coffee. If you are a coffee fan, and let's be honest, you probably are, this is a must. It's biohacking news. Hello again, Tony Whiten here. And I am in London at the moment, actually. Come home to... the sound quality might be a little bit different because I've come home with my laptop but without my microphone. And I've gone home to sell my house. So it's interesting being back in London after living the good life in Portugal, but really nice to be back and recording this biohacking news episode with the awesome Adam Parker today. And topics including a new report debunking myths around morning coffee, insights into the safety of biohacking practices, and for the 7th consecutive year, the UN has named Finland as the happiest country in the world, and me and Adam have got a theory on why, which we think you're going to like. This is my new format. I've been trialling it for a couple of weeks, and it's basically an excuse to get my favourite people on. So let's bring on Adam Parker. Adam, how you doing?
Tony, doing fantastic, man. Great to jump on and connect.
Yeah, we were nattering so much about Portugal, about liver flushes, that we wouldn't have had time to record a podcast if we didn't actually get started. So there's questions I need to ask you. Are we allowed to talk about the fact that I'm desperately trying to persuade you to join the Portugal tribe?
Yes, definitely. I mean, yeah, we my wife and my son, we went over there in January. Absolutely loved it, and yeah, so it's definitely on the cards, you know. And we hung out with you and your family. So we're pumped. We absolutely loved it. Great weather, great community. Do you know what I really liked about it? The roads, just so nice. Honestly, I was like, this is such a lovely infrastructure. We were driving because sometimes when you go on a holiday and different side of the road, different side of this of the car driving, it's a little bit nerve wracking. But it was just easy from the get go, and I was like, brilliant. So yeah, we're definitely looking into it for sure.
I know your podcast is very popular as well, and you're going to have to do the same as me, which is always insert a disclaimer if you move to Portugal. The disclaimer being, you don't have to move to somewhere hot to get the benefits of all these biohacks.
Yeah, I mean, I think living in a city has its challenges, right? But there's just something alluring about a sunny location. And here's the thing: if you live in Europe, it's doable, right? If you find the right spot. So, me and my wife, we're always trying to find somewhere sunny just to get a bit of sun. And so, yeah, at the moment, Portugal's on the radar for sure. But as I said, you can be healthy living in London, living in those big. It's more than doable. I live in London right now. I can do it. But yeah,
I am currently in London as well. So let's get on to this biohacking news then. Thanks. You were one of my first people to look up when I was considering changing the format of my podcast, which I've been doing for almost 10 years. It's this more sort of biohacking news format and getting people who I know the listeners really like on a sort of semi-regular basis.
Yeah, sure.
Some of these stories. And the first story we've got is, should you drink coffee on waking or wait 90 minutes? And this is really interesting. There's a new study that's come out. In fact, it's a new review, and it's done a deep dive into the latest caffeine science. And they have shown there is no evidence that caffeine ingestion upon waking is somehow responsible for an afternoon crash, or that delaying consumption would somehow prevent it if it did occur. And this was brought to my attention by Max Lugavere, who posted this. He did a great post on it. And he said, I was shocked to see how many people DM'd me thinking, because they'd literally become afraid of having coffee in the morning, they were sort of avoiding it, and they were desperate for a coffee, but they weren't having it for 90 minutes. And now they feel like they can drink their coffee in the morning in peace and quiet. And actually, I'm glad this is our first story today, because with your sort of main role, specializing in liver detox, I'm fascinated to know what you think about this new review.
Yeah. So firstly, big fan of Max's work, and it was great to meet him actually last year at the Health Optimization Summit. And it's great that he brings this information to the biohacking community. It's really interesting, isn't it? Coffee. Everyone's got their own intimate relationship with coffee. Yeah. Everyone's got their own little fixes. This what type of coffee they like when they have it. Yeah. In terms of timing, it's a funny one, right? Because the detox coach in me is thinking about, well, obviously in the morning, I would want you to get minerals and hydrate, maybe a binder. But at the same time, coffee, sounds from this study, coffee can be taken at any point in the day, right? First thing. For me personally, I always think, coffee on an empty stomach's probably not the best thing to do, right? It can fire up the adrenals. But again, everyone's different. Everyone has their own way of dealing with coffee. You speak to some people that will do 4 to 5 coffees in a day. I would be on another planet,
right?
If that was me, right? I'm more of a, if I do, I go through periods of not having coffee. If I do, no more than 2 a day, because I'm very sensitive to it. But again, I think this is a good piece because it puts to bed the confusion, because everyone, I think in this space, everyone is trying to do the best thing. They want to be healthy. So they're listening to the guidance of people like Max and all these other individuals trying to just navigate all of this information. And actually, I think it adds a bit of clarity to, okay, if I want to just get up and hit an espresso, then that's cool as well, because I think we can overthink a lot of this information. We kind of go into information overloads with all of the health information in this space.
And on that theme, I've got the paper in front of me. And it says, on the theme of overthinking, it says that though there may be an upside to delaying morning caffeine intake under conditions of sufficient sleep, this has to do with the magnitude of effect rather than proposed mechanisms related to prolonging the cortisol peak, continued declines in adenosine, or avoiding an afternoon crash. And then it says, a significant drawback in the argument related to cortisol is that a similar effect occurs with intense resistance exercise performed soon after waking. Following this line of reasoning would imply that this type of early morning exercise should be avoided. However, that notion makes no scientific or pragmatic sense. So, right. You could start to overthink it and think, I better not work out early in the morning because I'm going to get a cortisol spike. But obviously you wouldn't do that because it's great to do some exercise first thing in the morning.
I think ultimately, right, I think this stuff is great, but I always feel there is so much value in tapping in to your intuition. Because you'll know, right? If someone wakes up and tries coffee first thing and doesn't agree with them, they'll just know, like, okay, maybe that's not for me. So I think this stuff is amazing for giving us guidance and removing confusion, because we're all looking at these studies and these health influences on, well, what is the best thing to do? Because, I'm just trying to work it out. But I do you know what? I'm always just lean into your intuition. Like, because for example, we kind of know exercise is good. And if it feels good in the morning, then great. I think with anything, there's half listening to the studies, listening to the people who are, it's their job to deliver this information. And then the other half is taking that ownership and being like, right, I'm just going to, okay, how do I feel if I do coffee first thing every single day for a week versus what I used to do? And then we can start to navigate and find what works for us, Yeah.
Yeah. So I had my first coffee this morning. Let me work it out. I think it was about 60 minutes after waking. What about you?
So, we're good friends and I'm all about transparency. My first coffee this morning was at 8:00 and it was a coffee enema. So yeah, so it's not, it didn't go down my throat, went up the other way. So, if I'm being completely honest, so I'm feeling great. But no, I haven't had any normal coffee this morning. So whenever I do a coffee enema, which is great for liver detox, I won't do coffee down the throat, because again, that's just a little bit too much going into the system in one day.
Yeah. Okay. And you presumably get that massive boost anyway.
What's really interesting with coffee enemas is, obviously it's caffeine, but actually what it does, it really fires up your parasympathetic nervous system. So actually, when you're doing it, you're just in Zen mode, right? Which you'd think, it's caffeine, but it has a really relaxing effect on the body. Wow. And I saw a really good screenshot of a lady, because I'm in all the detox Facebook groups, just kind of keeping an eye on trends. And she had her Oura Ring scores, right, of like real time. And I think it was like heart rate variability. And it was a massive change when she was doing the coffee enema into like this really relaxed mode. So obviously we drink coffee because it's like gives us that buzz, fires us up. It actually does the opposite effect when you take it rectally. It really calms you.
Wow.
But the main reason for doing a coffee enema is to stimulate bile flow, to stimulate a detox effect. Yeah. So again, I do that as maintenance. But yes, it fires you up. You feel like $1 million after a coffee enema.
That leads us neatly onto the next story. So looking at biohacking news and biohacking in the news, there's a new article focusing on biohacking on the Pop Sugar website. It's really asking, is biohacking safe? And I've sort of sent you this link to have a look at. And there are some positive elements to this story, and they're sort of asking the question, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's the theme. They've got 4 different experts on. They've got, in crypto, there's this concept known as FUD. Have you heard of that, Adam?
Do you know what? I dipped my toe in crypto world a couple of years ago, and I loved all the different sayings like going to the moon and all of these random sayings.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've never heard of FOD. Please tell me, Tony.
FOD stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that is what sort of he's just constantly introduced into crypto. And funnily enough, he's also constantly introduced with biohacking as well. So the concerns in this article from the doctors include lack of scientific evidence around biohacking, potential for unknown consequences, unregulated supplements, risks of dietary changes, misinformation, individual differences, and contamination and illness risk, all of which has a place. But I think what's quite interesting for me with biohacking is, on the positive side, it encourages us to take a little bit of ownership of our health. Sure, don't go completely change your diet if you're already ill and you haven't spoken to your doctor about it, but take some responsibility. Do some, maybe don't do a liver flush or a coffee enema without speaking to someone like yourself in the first place. Acknowledge the fact that this is sort of potentially a positive thing. What do you think about biohacking? Is it safe? And is it possible to have have you ever had a biohack that sounded too good to be true? And actually, it was true. It was too good.
Yeah. So if we're talking about someone that's never heard of biohacking and they kind of enter this space, if you look at someone like, I think his name's Brian Johnson. Have you heard of this guy?
I have, yeah.
But I think what he's doing is he's really trying to pioneer. So for anyone who doesn't know, check him out on Instagram. He's spending like millions on his health, really regimented, doing all these things. Yeah. I think that's the extreme end of biohacking, right?
Kind of reverse aging, isn't he? And he wants
reverse aging, and he's
never die. He looks like he's 18 years old.
Exactly. So that's the far end. But then you've got the other side, which is like, well, I just want to improve my sleep, and I've heard doing a bit of breath work at home can do really good, and there's these mushroom coffee things that work really. So again, it's a broad spectrum of what biohacking is. But what I liked what you said, Tony, because ultimately it's just taking a bit of ownership and saying, do you know what? Okay, wherever you lie on the kind of health spectrum, if you're into kind of allopathic and that's your thing, this is a bit of a step out to be like, okay, cool. I trust that form of medicine. And what else can I do for myself to see how I can improve myself? So again, it's a bit of ownership taking, and there's so much we can do that will help us improve different health markers. And when I say health markers, how did he sleep? How do you feel? How much energy do you have? How are you turning up? Because, for example, this is a really good indicator. If you're in a meeting or, you've got to really turn it on and the words come to you really quick. Yeah. Right. Or you're in flow. That's the sign that your body's working optimally. And you can influence that with breath work, with intermittent fasting, with certain supplements, tracking certain things. So really, to distill it, it's really health hacks, if I'm honest. If we want to really distill it and demystify what biohacking is, it's health hacks that can improve our day-to-day that don't require too much effort, really, once we understand it. So I think the whole biohacking space is great, but again, there's spectrums to it. And I like what you said, just a bit of ownership. Okay, I'm going to try this out, see how I feel. And I think the first biohack I ever did, and I'm sure you'll be with me, is years ago. when Bulletproof Coffee came out. That was the first kind of biohack, because like coffee and butter and MC what oil, that But again, that was a way of hacking, fasting a bit longer or getting kind of your brain switched on. So really, it's just, for me, it's nice little hacks to improve how we feel in all different ways.
Do you know if you're getting enough magnesium? Because 4 out of 5 people aren't. Interrupting the podcast for one moment to say, this is a big problem because magnesium is involved in more than 300 biochemical reactions in your body. And right now, I want to talk to you about the most common signs to look out for that could indicate you're magnesium deficient. So, are you irritable or anxious? Do you struggle with insomnia? Do you experience muscle cramps or twitches? Do you have high blood pressure? Are you sometimes constipated? There are loads of other symptoms, but those are just a few questions. And here's what most people don't know. Taking any magnesium supplement won't solve your problem. I've been trying out a few new electrolyte brands recently, and frankly, I've been shocked at how many of them use really suboptimal types of magnesium. That is why, in terms of magnesium, I exclusively recommend Magnesium Breakthrough. It's the only full spectrum magnesium supplement with 7 unique forms of magnesium that your body can actually use and absorb. If you go to biooptimizers.com/zestology and use the code zestology10, you can get gifts with your purchase this month, up to 2 travel size bottles of Magnesium Breakthrough, so you can take it with you on your travels as well, especially if you go somewhere hot later on this year. So if you go to biooptimizers.com/zestology, this is a limited time offer. Use that code zestology10. That works all over the world, works on the UK site as well, which is biooptimizers.co.uk. Remember to use that code zestology10. And remember, it is really important to make sure you're getting enough magnesium, but magnesium that you can actually absorb. That's it. Back to the show.
There's a sort of mainstream narrative that emerges around these sort of new technologies, and I do not want to go down the sort of conspiracy theory path, but you have to say that this article and so many like them, I mean, talking about contamination with supplements, one of the doctors, Dr. Michelle Loy, highlighted concern around contamination in supplements. These supplements are often unregulated and run the risk of contamination, which can lead to illness or injury, which, I mean, look, sure, it's important to get good suppliers, but that does seem a little bit overblown. And you sort of think, I'll go back to that fear, uncertainty and doubt thing.
Yeah.
Often when I see biohacking covered in old school mainstream media, this is the way that it's covered. It's all a bit that it's sort of looked down as bro science, and you should actually trust the doctors and don't worry about the chocolate cake that you're eating because because that's okay. I don't know. Yeah. It seems to be a narrative around things like biohacking that
I think it's cut. I mean, here's the thing. Again, not to even dip our toes in conspiracy lane, but I think mainstream media, the kind of narrative is keep the status quo, right? And biohacking kind of is, I mean, biohacking is a $1 billion industry now, but is it mainstream? Is it accepted in that kind of, that avenue yet? Probably not. So I get it. It's like, be skeptical. It doesn't fit within our parameters, but as soon as it does, they'll be all over it. Like, just throw butter in your coffee. You'll be fine. Yeah. So I get it. It's kind of the playbook of mainstream media. But the bottom line is, it's such a big industry and there's so many influencers. As we said, Max is great around health. That, again, reading that sort of information makes you say to yourself, right, am I going to step outside this box and just unregulated? Okay, I'll do my research and see, And actually, when you work with a practitioner or you're following an influencer, and they'll normally say this is health influencer approved, and that gives you a bit of confidence, and it's taking the ownership piece of, okay, I'm going to research these different products because that doctor is right. There's a lot of garbage out there, 100%. But actually, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and you've got to do a bit of digging and start with some recommendations. I mean, there are some amazing supplements that you feel like, whoa, this is brilliant. I remember when I first found kind of mushroom drinks. many years ago. I was like, cordyceps or lion's mane. It's like, oh, okay, something's switched on. So yeah, the doctor's right, but also if we take a bit of ownership, we look into it, we can find good things that resonate with us personally.
I'm used to this sort of skepticism because I qualified in NLP back in 2006.
Yeah.
As you know, trained to the highest level that you can train in. Mm-hmm. NLP is another one that, often gets tarred with exactly the same sort of brushes, which is basically that it's not scientific, it's not regulated, and that it can be used to manipulate people, actually, is the other one with that. And part of the problem with NLP is that Neil Strauss wrote about it in his book, The Game.
Yeah.
But of course, all of these things, and especially with sort of mindset techniques, it totally depends with the intention with which you use it.
Yeah.
In terms of biohacking, I'm interested to know what you think, because I've been involved in this field for about 10 years or so with biohacking. Right from the start, it resonated so much with me. But the scene and the industry has changed over the years. It has become more libertarian. There's no doubt that there was a correlation between people who were into biohacking and anti-vax, for example, over the past few years.
Yeah.
And there's way more people into biohacking. At our swim club in Portugal, someone who's not that into health would say, "Oh, I love my biohacking." I was thinking, wow, that's a sign that the word biohacking is starting to resonate. So it is changing, isn't it?
It is. And do you know what I think? I think the world, again, this is my detox coaching hat on. We live in a very toxic world, and over 80,000 different chemicals released since the last 50 years. Chronic health is becoming more common, and I think people are, and alongside that, information overload as well. So there's more information than ever, and people are empowered to do their own research. All it takes is just to have a little rummage around on Instagram. So there's a lot more information flowing now in the ether, and there's a lot more access to this information. What's really interesting, I'm going off on a little tangent. When I was in Portugal, one of the people that we were staying with, their parents were staying, and their parents were in their 80s, and I got on really well with the mother. And if she was born when I was born, she would have been a biohacker. But when she was my age, she didn't have all of this information. So she was just finding stuff. Just think, 50 years ago, how would we have found this information? It would have been like, go to the library and read a book. Yeah. And so now we've got all of this information. People, like you said, at your health club, they're going to be like, oh, I've heard of this term, and they want to empower themselves and just see what they can do without going down certain routes, right? Which I think is great, which I think is really great. And, again, we come back to this responsibility piece, more people taking a bit of ownership, because there's so much you can do. Sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful things, Sometimes, do you know what? I'm just not going to have breakfast. And that can transform people's health. That can lose their belly fat and all of that sort of stuff. So I think biohacking, yes, is definitely getting more of a name out there. And yeah, I think obviously a couple of years ago it was kind of pigeonholed with certain narratives, but I think ultimately people were looking for the shopping around, basically. We shop around for insurance, people are shopping around for their health, and they're like, you know what, okay, I've heard about this supplement, give it a go.
And just going back to that quote in the article, which one of the doctors said, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I can think of quite a few fairly basic biohacks, just sort of simple lifestyle changes that sound too good to be true and actually are too good, just really good.
What are your top 2 or 3 that are just...
Stuff like the concept of methylated vitamins totally changed my life. I just don't methylate very well. So that, and then I was suffering with histamine intolerance before the term histamine intolerance was even in existence, but just following a low histamine diet has had a huge difference to my life.
Yeah.
I mean, those are just 2 to start. Not having breakfast is a good one as well. And then some of the more fancy ones too.
Yeah. We were saying this before we press record. Tony, I would absolutely love for you to do some liver flushing.
Oh.
I honestly, like,
you've now convinced me today. You today convinced me.
Because we were saying that. So I gave up alcohol for 3.5 years for many reasons. You know, transitioning into a new identity, and that didn't resonate with me, and also at the time I was still trying to recover my health, and I just couldn't drink. You wouldn't even get sometimes you have a beer, you're on holiday, you get the buzz, wouldn't even get that, and I was like, this is not serving me.
Yeah.
And I gave up, and anyway, through that time I was doing loads of cleansing. I was doing loads of liver cleansing, and there's many different types of cleansing that I went through. But at the other side of that, when I'd cleanse my liver of all the congestion and the gallstones, all of that sort of stuff, and this is I reflect on this. I think it's quite funny, but basically I came back to drinking occasionally, like when the opportunity presented itself. And there was one day where it was a friend's 40th, and I had more drinks than I would normally have, and I didn't have any hangover. I felt great the next day, and it was like it took me back to like when you're 18 years old, and I thought, wow, that made me think, okay, is it something to do with your liver function or your age? Because actually, I'm not having any issues the next day, and it was a real eye opener. Yeah. And you know, methylation issue. I mean, I've had all of that. I had all of that stuff as well. So anyway, I would absolutely love to get on the liver flush train, Tony. I think you'd see some miraculous results, my friends.
Yeah, you persuaded me today.
Yeah,
I'm gonna give it a go. Can't say I'm not a little bit nervous about drinking all that olive oil, but I'll do it.
The weird thing is, right, here's the weird thing. You end up craving it. And I know it sounds odd. Wow. So for the listeners, there's a process going through a liver flush cleanse, but you drink basically a glass of olive oil and lemon juice. And it's, takes a while to, got to drink it. It's not like a sip. But here's the thing: once you do it a couple of times, you actually your body actually likes it because it knows it's cleansing. So I actually really enjoy the drink. It's odd, but when I first looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. But now it's like it's actually quite satisfying.
Okay, I'm in. I've got one more story. We've hardly got any time left. So sure. It is that the UN has just named Finland as the happiest country in the world for the 7th straight year. So every year, Finland is voted the happiest country in the world. And coincidence? Probably not. They've got 3.3 million saunas in Finland for a population of 5.6 million. So there's a sauna for every 2 people. And apparently every government building in Finland has a sauna. Is Finland so happy because they're all sitting naked, and they do go naked, because they're all sitting naked in a sauna together?
So I went to Finland a couple of years ago for the Biohacker Summit. They call it sauna. And you go naked into the sauna. That was because quick side story. That's when I first met Ryan Carter, Levite. So we were getting to know each other. We were all staying in this flat together with also Thomas of Omnos. And we all went into the sauna, and it's like everything off. And I was like, okay, but it was a lovely bonding experience. It's really interesting. It's embedded in their culture. It really is, and they're really happy people. So you got to think there's got to be a correlation there between, and what I also found was interesting. There's sauna etiquette as well. Right. You can't talk about certain things. If you're the last one in, you can't be the first one out of the sauna. It was fascinating. There's etiquette of sauna time. But they all seemed. We met loads of locals at the local sauna spots. Super nice people, right? So you got to wonder. There's definitely got to be a correlation.
Social vibe, isn't it? I mean, that's. And actually, when we were in Thailand, the most popular hangout in the evenings was the place where they had. You don't really need a sauna in Thailand, but they had a pit, ice bath, jacuzzis. Just going for ice baths, going to the gym, sitting around the fire pit afterwards. I did see one comment which said, did they do this survey in summer or in winter? Because obviously the winters are long and dark in Finland.
Yeah. It's interesting. What along with the saunaing element, something I noticed, all of the sauna spots were by the water. And the water is like, sometimes they've got to saw into the to get through. And what they would do is they would do sauna and then out into the cold water and then back. And I think so that hormesis element probably adds an element to it, because you feel like amazing after a cold plunge, right? Yeah. So that might play a part to it as well. But yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely a culture there of saunaing, and everyone was so nice, So I think there's definitely a connection there, and also a sense of community, because you're all in there together, and there's sauna etiquette, and there's business. I mean, it's like business. It's like families would sauna, because when I was there, I was asking questions like, so how does this work? So families all sauna together. A deal's done a deal will be done on the golf course here or in America. It's done in the sauna in Finland. So I think maybe the community element.
Mate. We're out of time.
There we go.
But you're coming back for our review podcast. So
yes.
Then remind people of your socials quickly.
Yes. My socials are Ideal Day Adam on Instagram, and my podcast, The Ideal Day Podcast, as well. Check it out. All things detox related.
The vision of you and Ryan in a sauna together. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure, Tony. Thank you.